Recently, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade ने इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड और फाइनेंसेस जैसे इश्यूज को एड्रेस करने के लिए एक कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑर्गेनाइज करी ऑन 18 दिसंबर, which was inaugurated by the Honorable Minister. इंस्टीट्यूट के वाइस चांसलर और डायरेक्टर डॉक्टर सुरजीत मित्रा ने बताया कि किस तरह से इंक्रीजिंग नॉर्थ साउथ बिजनेस इज ड्यू टू FDI inflows.
This institution started in 1963 because of the vision of the then and first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who wanted to have a sort of expert organization to facilitate external trade of India. It started as a human resource development organization. And over the 60s and 70s, it concentrated on human resource development for external trade in India. And we are glad to say that nearly 25,000 professionals have been trained here, which include policymakers, administrators, managers, entrepreneurs, exporters, and students. In the 80s, the era of academics began so far as IIFT is concerned. It evolved into a leading B school in the country, and today it's not only in the top 10 of the B schools in India, but it's one of the leading organizations in Asia Pacific. And in recognition of our academic activity, it was conferred deemed university status. So we give from doctoral to MBA degrees. And we have three campuses now, one in Delhi, another in Kolkata, and we have a satellite campus in Tanzania. In the 90s, this institution started focusing on research in international trade and investment. And we are glad to say that more than 700 important research studies have been published by this institution in collaboration with the government, private sector, UNTAD, UNIDO, ESCAP, WTO, World Bank, ADB, and many other multilateral organizations. And the decade of 2000 was the time when it evolved really as a think tank organization and started providing inputs to the policymakers in the government and also involved itself in strategy. And at that point of time, there were three important centers which were established in IIFT. One was the Center for WTO Studies. The other was Center for Small and Medium Enterprises, SME Studies. And the third one was the Technology Trade. In 2008, when there was a downturn in the global economy, then IIFT started feeling the need for a wider consultation amongst economists and political scientists for sort of meeting the challenges of the downturn. And as early as December 2008, we had the first EIITF. This conference is particularly important because although the global economy is limping back to normalcy, but the recovery has been very, very slow. While the US economy is showing the signs of recovery, the Europe still is a question mark. And the emerging economies particularly have shown green shoots. And they will we expect that they will play a larger role in the recovery process, particularly India and China. Just to quote a few statistics, the North-North trade has declined from 56% in 1990 to 36% in 2011, whereas the South-South trade has jumped from 8% to 24% in the same period, and the North-South trade is 37% for the last 12 years, starting from 2000. But at the same time, the FDI flow to the South has substantially increased. So which shows that there has been a considerable change in the architecture of global economy, and countries like India and China are likely to play a larger role.
इस कॉन्फ्रेंस का एक और हाईलाइट था मेक इन इंडिया कॉन्सेप्ट। ऑनरेबल मिनिस्टर का कहना था कि जिस तरह से हमारे पीएम साहब का कहना है कि मेक इन इंडिया को न सिर्फ हमें बढ़ाना है बल्कि सही तरीके से समझना भी है, वी रियली नीड टू वर्क ऑन दैट।
I think what is important for an institution of IIFT's credibility and stature is to make your research far more robust. I'm very appreciative of the effort which is going on, the rigorousness which is underlining your research, and I appreciate at no point in time the rigor should be lost out. But I would want research which speaks for immediate policy correction, policy making, whilst I appreciate research is just not for policy making, it is also for pedagogic reasons. It is also because you want to be very, very analytical about the way in which you look into data which comes out. Without undermining that, I'd certainly love to have an institution of IIFT's stature give us such quick, I don't want to call it data, give us such quick understanding of what is going on based on the rigorous research that you do, to tell us where the government of India should move forward in terms of foreign trade. Foreign trade today is not just going to be of commodities which are produced in A country to B country. The value chain idea which tells you that you can be producing a component, but that component being bought somewhere else is going to be taking the entire picture of trade forward, is, I think, a critical component on which I may be ill-informed, correct me if I'm adequately not informed on it. There's not much coming to me. I've been very critical of the ministry to say, please give us data which is going to help me to understand how this value chain system is helping out. Southeast Asia is doing very well. Only last week we had a conference where representatives from Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam had come, and we were talking to them. The kind of access they found in newer markets is amazing, and I appreciate that. And it is possible only when you're able to have data to tell you where the market exists, what kind of market exists. It's not only the final market for a completed good. So there is a lot more which can flow from you for people like us who are sitting and saying, let's have something concrete for us to, place a few bucks, so that's the direction in which we have to help our potential exporters, or look for exporters who would want to reach out to some. GDP growth in India in the past 2 decades has largely been supported by growth of services sector. India's manufacturing sector has stagnated at about 16% of the GDP, with India's share in the global manufacturing at only 1.8%. Export, particularly for a country like India, can just not be only agricultural goods. You have to have value addition, even for agricultural products. But if our manufacturing is languishing, if our manufacturing contributes only or has a share of only 1.8% of the world trade, there's something which we need to do. And on that, I certainly would want a lot of information support, data support, research support. China, where manufacturing constitutes about 34% of GDP and 13% of the world manufacturing, in 1991 was only at 2.9%. Only 2.9% of the world's trade in 1991 was with China, but they have moved up to 13.7%. These are things which you're aware, all of us are aware, but I would want empirical data and inferences derived from empirical data to tell the government, move this way, you'll probably be better off. I'm not sure it is available in that way. I might have a data being given to me, but I would want your expert minds to also infer from it to tell us what the policy should do. The new government's initiative Make in India has been a coherent approach to increasing the quantity and quality of manufacturing operations in India, which has been designated to facilitate investment, foster innovation, protect intellectual property, and build best-in-class manufacturing infrastructure. And that's what this government is going to be placing a lot of importance. Launched in September this year, the campaign envisages India as a global manufacturing hub, and it is a key pillar of the government strategy to rectify India's multiple socio-economic problems. Research is again required to find out how Make in India concept can be made into a successful reality, complete reality. We are emerging as a global center for information technology, research, development and innovation. FTAs are also being bone of contention, but with intensive research on the value addition caused by different FTAs signed by India, there would be a useful approach for policy implications. I appreciate the IIFT for organizing this conference at an appropriate time, and I wish the conference all success.
We'll request our chief guest to kindly release a book titled My World with Rafiki, an Economic Travelogue and Miscellany, authored by Dr. Biswajit Nath, faculty at IIFT.
We have in fact been extremely privileged to have you, madam, at the inaugural of this conference on empirical issues on international trade and finance. We are extremely grateful for your recognition of the significance of robust research in policy making. I am grateful, and this country will remain grateful for the bold steps you have taken, and I think it will go a long way in reinforcing India's trade and our making very strong. I am very sure, but I think the measures you are taking, the result of that would come, I think, in a much longer period, maybe 2 years or 3 years, because these are not the cosmetic measures which you have taken. We are extremely grateful to you.
इस कॉन्फ्रेंस की पॉपुलैरिटी का अंदाज़ा इसके पार्टिसिपेंट्स से लगाया जा सकता है। वर्ल्ड बैंक, एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक, FICCI, WTO जैसी बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ने इस कॉन्फ्रेंस में बढ़ चढ़कर पार्टिसिपेट किया।
It's a conference on empirical issues in international trade, and that's a huge topic that's become extremely important in the last decade or two, and it's evolved tremendously as well, so that there's many new techniques being used for empirical analysis of international trade, especially for understanding how trade takes place at the level of the individual firm. It may seem surprising that we haven't been doing that for many years, but we haven't. And it's only recently, as both the data and the statistical techniques have improved, that economists have been able to deal with that. That, I believe, is the main focus of many of the sessions of this conference, which seek to push ahead the research at the frontier of international economics.
We are working on a services trade project, and we have recorded information on regulation in services for 40 countries, including India, and that is a project that has just been released in May this year by 5 trade ministers, and we hope that it's a useful tool for policymakers, and we are going to talk about it at this conference as well.
This 4th EIITF conference has received an overwhelming response from the academia, where we have received more than 170 papers, and after a robust peer review process, a total of 96 papers have been selected for presentation at the conference. Finally, around 80 papers were presented in this conference, which were spread over 21 technical sessions covering, among others, exchange rate and capital flows, farm heterogeneity and trade, macroeconomics and finance, RTS and gravity modeling, trade and development, trade and environment, trade facilitation issues and WTO, trade in services, and finally trade theory and policy. A salient feature of this year's EIITF conference is the conduct of 2 policy forums on issues of contemporary policy interest. These are issues pertaining to trade facilitation in association with FICCI and East Asia and South Asia integration in collaboration with Asian Development Bank. The discussions at the policy forums has been enriched with the participation of renowned policymakers, industry representatives, academicians, and representatives from multilateral bodies. Such mutual learning in this kind of high caliber academic conference, we expect that this will push the frontiers of academic research in international trade and finance and better understanding of policies in these fields further.
It is indeed heartening to note that IIFT has organized this event for the last several years, and consequently what Jaideep read earlier, the kind of papers and the kind of sessions that you had, which were very contemporary and very appropriate for a developing country to initiate a discussion on areas which are so relevant for a large chunk of global population today. Foreign trade has a very peculiar situation in a developing country. It begins right from the point of distinguishing between trade and commerce. There are so many papers and documents and reports that we read make little sense to us, because many a times so much of academic literature is generated which really is of no use to a policymaker, because it doesn't really lead to any substantive learnings out of that huge amount of theoretical work that has been done. And therefore a conference which addresses issues which are relevant in the context of public policy evolution, I think is extremely welcome and very desirable. So therefore I think this conference has a lot of relevance particularly in the present context of India's development. Biggest challenge which as a policymaker we face is at what point that theoretical analysis should end and the practical learning should come out of it. I think that is the biggest challenge that, and particularly I have seen in the area of trade. If you look at trade law related developments, and since we deal with a whole lot of WTO related dispute settlement issues, there is so little work which has been done. If you were to look at identifying 10 good lawyers who can actually advise you on issues relating to foreign trade and not disputes, it will be difficult for you to find them. So there is so much interest in trade and commerce, but there is so little capacity available in developing countries. And India is one of the exceptions. So if I am feeling this in India, you can imagine what people in Africa and people in the rest of the developing world would be feeling. Actually, India is one of the much better endowed countries as far as skills relating to trade and commerce and trade is concerned. There is so much which has happened in the last few years. IIFT has played a significant role. So there is so much of lack of information or misinformation. And therefore, these kinds of events very significantly contribute to this change, this shift from a purely theoretical paradigm of research and analysis to infusing that knowledge, that gain, that information into actual practice. And I think our companies need it in abundance. They really need it in abundance, because the world over, and particularly in the developed countries, it is all the large companies which provide that knowledge. So there is a huge potential in India for developing this kind of a knowledge base, and I think this kind of a conference should logically help it.